An excerpt from The Acts of King Arthur by John Steinbeck, read by Lisa M. Kendrick. King Arthur held Whitsun Court at Winchester, that ancient royal town favored by God and his clergy, as well as the seat and tomb of many kings. The roads were clogged with eager people, knights returning to stamp in court the record of their deeds, of bishops, clergy monks, and of the defeated, fettered to their paroles, the prisoners of honor. And on Itchen water, pathway from Solent and the sea, the little ships brought succulents, lampreys, eels, and oysters, plaice and sea trout, while barges loaded with caskets of whale oil and casks of wine came tide-borne. Bellowing oxen walked to the spits on their own 4 hooves, while geese and swans, sheep and swine, waited their turn in hurdle pens. Every householder with a strip of colored cloth, a ribbon, any textile gaiety, hung it from a window to flap its small festival, and those in lac tied boughs of pine and laurel over their doors. In the great hall of the castle on the hill, the king sat high, and next below the fair elite company of the Round Table, noble and decorous as knights themselves, while at the long trestle boards the people were as fitted as toes in a tight shoe. Then, while the glistening meat dripped down the tables, it was the custom for the defeated to celebrate the deeds of those who had overcome them, while the victor dipped his head in disparagement of his greatness and fended off the compliments with small defensive gestures of his hands. And as at public penitence, sins are given stature they do not deserve, little sins grow up and baby sins are born. So those knights who lately claimed mercy, perchance might raise the exploits of the brave and merciful beyond reasonable gratitude for their lives, and in anticipation of some small notice of value. This no one said of Lancelot, sitting with bowed head in his golden-lettered seat at the round table. Some said he nodded and perhaps dozed, for the testimony to his greatness was long, and the monotony of his victories continued for many hours. Lancelot's immaculate frame had grown so great that men took pride in being unhorsed by him. Even this notice was an honor. And since he had won many victories, it is possible that knights he had never seen claimed to have been overthrown by him. It was a way to claim attention for a moment, and as he dozed and wished to be otherwhere, he heard his deeds exalted beyond his recognition, and some mighty exploits once attributed to other men were brought bright painted out and laid on the shining pile of his achievements. There is a seat of worth beyond the reach of envy, whose occupant ceases to be a man, and becomes the receptacle of the wishful longings of the world, a seat most often reserved for the dead, from whom neither reprisal nor reward may be expected. But at this time, Sir Lancelot was its unchallenged tenant. And he vaguely heard his strength favorably compared with elephants, his ferocity with lions, his agility with deer, his cleverness with foxes, his beauty with the stars, his justice with Solon, his stern probity with St. Michael, his humility with newborn lambs, his military niche would have caused the archangel Gabriel to raise his head. Sometimes the guests paused in their chewing the better to hear, and a man who slopped his mescaline drew frowns. Arthur on the dais sat very still, and did not fiddle with his bread, and beside him sat lovely Guinevere, still as a painted statue of herself. Only her inward eyes confessed her vagrant thoughts, and Lancelot studied the open pages of his hands. Not large hands, but delicate where they were not knobby and scarred with old wounds. His hands were fine-textured, soft of skin and very white, protected by the pliant leather lining of his gauntlets. The great hall was not still, not all upturned listening. Everywhere was movement as people came and went, some serving huge planks of meat and baskets of bread, round and flat like a plate. And there were restless ones who could not sit still, while everyone under burden of half-chewed meat and the foods and freshets of mead and beer found necessity for repeated departures and returns. Lancelot, exhausted, the theme of his hands, and squinted down the long hall and watched the movement with eyes so nearly closed that he could not see faces. And he thought how he knew everyone by carriage. The knights in long, full-floor, brushing robes walked lightly on their feet, barely touching the ground because their bodies were released from their crushing boxes of iron. Their feet were long and slender because, being horsemen, they had never widened and flattened their feet with walking. The ladies, full-skirted, moved like water, and this was schooled and designed, taught to little girls with the helps of whips on raw ankles, while their shoulders were bound back with nail-studded harnesses, and their heads held high and rigid by painful collars of woven willow, or, for the forgetful, by supports of painted wire. For to learn the high, proud head on a swan's neck, to learn to flow like water, is not easy for a little girl as she becomes a gentlewoman. But knights and ladies both match their movements to their garments. The sweep and rhythm of a long gown informs the manner of its moving. It is not necessary to inspect a serf or a slave, his shoulders wide and sloping from burdens, legs short and thick and crooked, feet splayed and widespread, the whole frame slowly crushed by weights. In the great hall, the serving people walked under burdens with the slow weight of oxen and scuttled like crabs, crooked and nervous when the weight was gone. A pause in the recital of his virtues drew Lancelot's attention. The knight who had tried to kill him in a tree had finished, and among the benches Sir Kay was rising to his feet. Lancelot could hear his voice before he spoke, reciting deeds like leaves and bags and barrels. Before his friend could reach the center of the hall, Sir Lancelot wriggled to his feet and approached the dais. "My lord king," he said, "forgive me if I ask leave to go. An old wound has broken open." Arthur smiled down at him. "I have the same old wound," he said. "We'll go together. Perhaps you will come to the tower room when we have attended to our wounds." And he signed the trumpets to end the gathering and the bodyguards to clear the hallway. The stone stairway to the king's room was in thickness of the wall of the round tower of the keep. At short intervals, a deep embrasure and a long beveled arrow slit commanded some aspect of the town below. No armed men guarded this stairway. They were below and had passed Sir Lancelot in. The king's room was round, a horizontal slice of the tower, windowless save for the arrow slits, entered by a narrow arched door. It was a sparsely furnished room, carpeted with rushes, a wide bed, and at its foot a carved oaken chest, a bench before the fireplace, and several stools completed the furnishings. But the raw stone of the tower was plastered over and painted with solemn figures of men and angels walking hand in hand. 2 candles and the reeky fire gave the only light. When Lancelot entered, the queen stood up from the bench before the fire, saying, "I will retire, my lords." "No, stay," said Arthur. "Stay," said Lancelot. The king was stretched comfortably in the bed. His bare feet, projecting from his long saffron robe, caressed each other, the toes curled downward. The queen was lovely in the firelight, all lean, down-flowing lines of green samite. She wore her little mouth-corner smile of concealed amusement, and her bold, golden eyes were the same color as her hair. And odd it was that her lashes and slender brows were dark, an oddity contrived with kohl, brought in a small enameled pot from an outland by a far-wandering knight. "How are you holding up?" Arthur asked. "Not well, my lord. It's harder than the quest." "Did you really do all the things they said you did?" Lancelot chuckled. "Truthfully, I don't know. It sounds different when they tell about it, and most of them feel it necessary to add a little. When I remember leaping 8 feet, they tell it at 50, and frankly, I don't recall several of those giants at all." The queen made room for him on the fire bench, and he took his seat back to the fire. Guinevere said, "The damsel, what's her name, talked about fair queen enchantress, but she was so excited that her words tumbled over each other. I couldn't make out what happened." Lancelot looked nervously away. "You know how excitable young girls are," he said. "A little backcountry necromancy in a pasture." "But she spoke particularly of queens. My lady, I think everyone is a queen to her. It's like the giants, makes the story richer." "Then they were not queens." "Well, for that matter, when you get into the field of enchantment, everyone is a queen, or thinks she is. Next time she tells it, the little damsel will be a queen. I do think, my lord, there's too much of that kind of thing going on. It's a bad sign. Kind of restlessness. When people go in for fortune-telling and all such things, maybe there should be a law about it." "There is," said Arthur, "but it's not in secular hands. The church is supposed to take care of that." "Yes, but some of the nunneries are going in for it. Well, I'll put a bug in the archbishop's ear." The queen observed, "I gather you rescue damsels by the dozen." She put her fingers on his arm, and a searing shock ran through his body, and his mouth opened in amazement at a hollow ache that pressed upward against his ribs and shortened his breath. After a moment she said, "How many damsels did you rescue?" His mouth was dry. "Of course there were a few, madame, there always are." "And all of them made love to you?" "That they did not, madame. There you protect me." "I? Yes, since with my lord's permission I swore to serve you all of my life, and gave my knightly courtly love to you. I am sheltered from damsels by your name." "And do you want to be sheltered?" "Yes, my lady. I'm a fighting man. I have neither time nor inclination for any other kind of love. I hope this pleases you, my lady. I sent many prisoners to ask your mercy." "I never saw such a crop of them," Arthur said. "You must have swept some countries clean." Guinevere touched him on the arm again, and with side-glancing golden eyes saw the spasm that shook him. "While we're on the subject, I want to mention one lady you did not save. When I saw her, she was a headless corpse and not in good condition, and the man who brought her in was half crazed." "I'm ashamed of that," said Lancelot. "She was under my protection, and I failed her. I suppose it was my shame that made me force the man to do it. I'm sorry. I hope you released him from the burden." "Not at all," she said. "I wanted him away before the feast reeked up the heavens. I sent him with his burden to the Pope. His friend will not improve on the way, and if his loss of interest in ladies continues, he may turn out to be a very holy man, a hermit or something of that nature if he isn't a maniac first." The king rose on his elbow. "We will have to work out some system," he said. "The rules of errantry are too loose, and the quests overlap. Besides, I wonder how long we can leave justice in the hands of men who are themselves unstable. I don't mean you, my friend, but there may come a time when order and organization from the crown will be necessary." The queen stood up. "My lords, will you grant me permission to leave you now? I know you will wish to speak of great things foreign and perhaps tiresome to a lady's ears." The king said, "Surely, my lady, go to your rest." "No, sire, not rest. If I do not lay out the designs for the needlepoint, my ladies will have no work tomorrow." "But these are feast days, my dear." "I like to give them something every day, my lord. They're lazy things, and some of them so woolly in the mind that they forget how to thread a needle from day to day. Forgive me, my lords." She swept from the room with proud and powerful steps, and the little breeze she made in the still air carried a strange scent to Lancelot, a perfume which sent a shivering excitement coursing through his body. It was an odor he could not know, for it was the smell of Guinevere, distilled by her own skin. And as she passed through the door and descended the steps, he saw himself leap up and follow her, although he did not move. And when she was gone, the room was bleak, and the glory was gone from it, and Sir Lancelot was dog-weary, tired almost to weeping. "What a queen she is," said King Arthur softly, "and what a woman equally. Merlin was with me when I chose her. He tried to dissuade me with his usual doomful prophecies. That was one of the few times I differed with him. Well, my choice has proved him fallible. She has shown the world what a queen should be. All other women lose their sheen when she is present." Lancelot said, "Yes, my lord. and for no reason he knew, except perhaps the intemperate dullness of the feast, he felt lost, and a cold knife of loneliness pressed against his heart. The king was chuckling. It is the device of ladies that their lords have great matters to discuss, when if the truth were told, we bore them. And I hope the truth is never told. Why, you look haggard, my friend. Are you feverish? Did you mean that about an old wound opening? No, the wound was what you thought it was, my lord, and it is true that I can fight, travel, live on berries, fight again, go without sleeping, and come out fresh and fierce. But sitting still at Whiteson feast has wearied me to death. Arthur said, I can see it. We'll discuss the realm's health another time. Go to your bed now. Have you your old quarters? No, better ones. Sir Kay has cleared 5 knights from the lovely lordly rooms over the north gate. He did it in memory of an adventure which we, God help us, will have to listen to tomorrow. I accept your dismissal, my lord. And Lancelot knelt down and took the king's beloved hand in both of his and kissed it. Good night, my liege lord, my liege friend, he said, and then stumbled blindly from the room and felt his way down the curving stone steps past the arrow slits. As he came to the level of the next landing, Guinevere issued silently from a darkened entrance. He could see her in the thin light from the narrow slit. She took his arm and led him to her dark chamber.